QT Academy, empowering teachers to empower each other.
Hello and welcome to the sixth in our series of Quality Teaching Academy member webinars on the elements of the quality teaching model. This afternoon, we're focusing on the element of knowledge integration. If we haven't already met, my name is Michelle Ware and I'm one of the Quality Teaching Rounds advisors. With me this afternoon is my fellow advisor, Kate Shawland. We're experienced teachers from government and independent systems, and we're joined as well by our colleagues from the Teachers and Teaching Research Centre here at the University of Newcastle. I'm broadcasting this afternoon from the traditional lands of the Kaurna people in Adelaide, and Kate is tuning in from Awabakal country in Newcastle, which is about 200 kilometres north of Sydney at the university's Callaghan campus. We pay our respects to elders past, present and those emerging, and we certainly welcome Indigenous colleagues with us in this webinar. We encourage you to add the land you're joining us from in the chat or beside your name if you'd like. Now, today's webinar brings together people from right across our country, from far north Queensland to regional Victoria, Western Australia to Tasmania, and schools throughout New South Wales. We all probably have school memories of doing projects or perhaps looking at particular countries or continents where we might have sung a song from the country, we've learned about the customs, maybe coloured in a map, maybe even had a cultural day where we've had traditional food and dressed up in traditional costumes. But this type of thematic approach to learning about, say, Africa or Japan, for example, runs the risk of loosely bringing together bits and pieces of knowledge in a superficial way under the guise of knowledge integration. So this afternoon, we're going to have a good look at knowledge integration. We're going to clarify what it is and what it isn't, and have a look at some examples of knowledge integration in action. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us on qtacademy@newcastle.edu.au, and we'll be happy to answer them. So knowledge integration sits within the significance dimension of the QT model, and it really helps students to see the links between learning across subjects and topics. The Classroom Practice Guide talks about knowledge integration as meaningful connections that are made between different topics and or between different subjects. For example, when students address themes or problems that require knowledge from multiple topics or subject areas, it's likely that knowledge integration will be high. This is also the case for assessment, and in terms of assessment tasks, where they require students to make meaningful connections between topics and subjects, knowledge integration is likely to be high. It's really easy for such opportunities to be missed, however, when knowledge boundaries are really narrowly defined and restricted to just a single topic or a subject area. Many of you will be familiar with the classroom and assessment practice guides, but if this is the first time seeing it for you, then just let me explain how each of the elements is set out. So you'll find a description on the left-hand side of the guide where we talk about where a particular element is there in a high degree and a low degree. Underneath, we have a bold question, which sort of gives the spirit of the element, followed by a 1 to 5 coding scale to help us have a clear description to talk about the extent to which a particular element is present in a lesson, task, or even a program. On the other side of the page, we have some notes which really help to flesh out the description, followed by some suggestions that you might like to use to spark ideas on how you can enhance this particular element in your practice. Let's have a look now at the ideas behind knowledge integration. And certainly the thinking was not new. In the 1800s, the idea of integration in relation to schools was focused mostly on the school's role in promoting social integration, so the idea of public schools. And by the late 1800s, there was discussion about integration of studies. And so it continued through into the 1920s and the 1930s. And way back in 1938, John Dewey wrote about the idea of integration like this: almost everyone has had occasion to look back upon his school days and wonder what has become of the knowledge he was supposed to have amassed during his years of schooling. But it was so segregated when it was acquired, and hence so disconnected from the rest of his experience, that it is not available under the actual conditions of life. Now, this quote really draws attention to the idea of knowledge being connected to important ideas and concepts that link with students' own interests and experiences. One academic from the US, James Bean, has written extensively on this topic and has a really helpful way of looking at the idea of bringing together key disciplinary knowledge from between and among subjects and topics. He says, when we put together a jigsaw puzzle, we usually have a picture to guide us. None of the pieces means anything taken alone. Only when the pieces are put together do they mean something, in fact. And so this jigsaw puzzle metaphor is not unlike how young people experience the curriculum in too many schools. They move from one classroom to another, from one teacher to another, confronted by disconnected, fragmented pieces of knowledge or information and skills. And James Bean says for these young people, the curriculum is like a pile of jigsaw puzzle pieces without a picture. Let's have a look at some common misconceptions now about knowledge integration. I've just picked out a few here. The first one is that knowledge integration is the same as a thematic approach to teaching. Now, a program based on a theme or focused on a particular problem doesn't necessarily produce knowledge integration. These approaches can result in a series of loosely collected activities that neither deepen our students' understanding of the particular subjects involved, nor do they shed light on the connections between the specific subjects. Another misconception is that knowledge integration can only happen in a primary school setting. The nature of primary classrooms, where one teacher can deliver a lot of the learning and teaching experiences there, can certainly integrate and connect bodies of knowledge, and that is vastly different to the high school setting, where students change teachers and rooms for every subject. However, this doesn't mean that knowledge integration can't happen in high schools. At my last school, I did an audit of all the year 7 and 8 topics that students studied when they came into school over the 4 terms of the year. It was a really interesting exercise, actually, because it revealed some very unexpected patterns of study for our students. It turned out that in the first term of year 7, their first year of high school, students were studying me, myself, I in English, all about me in health, and a portraiture unit called This Is Me in visual arts. None of the different faculties knew that the others were all addressing similar ideas, and the students coming from a primary school context where typically learning is more connected across the subjects, they must have thought it was a bit strange because they're going from subject to subject without any connection between the about me topics. So as a result of this mapping exercise, some of the units were shuffled to different parts of the year to better align learning for the students. And some of the head teachers got together to map their syllabus outcomes and find really meaningful connections between these discrete bodies of knowledge. So with collaboration and some careful planning, we can begin to connect the pieces for students in a meaningful way. And the third one here is the misconception that knowledge integration can only be achieved through project-based or problem-based learning. This approach may provide opportunities for connecting a range of knowledge from different subject areas, but knowledge integration can occur in all approaches to teaching by considering where discrete bodies of knowledge can be meaningfully connected, sometimes through links to real-world issues or ideas and the concepts that are really important to students. So let's have a look at the coding scale, which not only provides a way to decide on the extent to which the element is present in a task or a lesson or a program, but it can also be used to scaffold the ways that knowledge integration can be embedded to a greater degree. So the bold question at the top of the coding statements helps us to really focus on the spirit of the element. In this case, to what extent do lessons, and we can also say tasks and programs, regularly demonstrate links between and within subjects and key learning areas? So at a 5, we see that meaningful connections are regularly made between topics or subject areas by the teacher and or the students. At a coding of a 4, we have several of these connections being made. At a coding of a 3, there's at least one meaningful connection made. At a coding of a 2, we see that some minor or trivial connections are made, but knowledge is mostly restricted to that of the specific topic or subject area. And then at a coding of a 1, there are no meaningful connections. All knowledge is restricted to that explicitly defined within a topic or a subject area. So let's have a look at an example now around the knowledge of graphing. So at a coding of a 1, students might learn how to display data on a graph in science, maths, and geography classes, but there's no connection between the learning in these subjects. A coding of a 2, we might see there may be some mention that graphs can be used in different subjects, but the knowledge about graphing is mostly restricted to the specific subject areas. At the coding of a 3, maths and science teachers might make some connection for the students between knowledge of graphing and maths and how that knowledge links with graphing and science. A coding of a 4 might see students being made aware of, or some students might actually identify it themselves, the links between the graphing skills used in math, science, and geography, and draw on their own learning across these subject areas to create more accurate and effective graphs in upcoming assessments in these 3 subjects. And at a coding of a 5, the teacher and or the students would regularly connect knowledge about data recording and display from a number of related subject areas. And so students can draw on this cross-disciplinary knowledge to produce higher quality graphs. Here are a few other examples to consider. A Year 12 visual arts essay brings together the body of knowledge about essay writing, typically taught in English or perhaps history, with the body of knowledge about art criticism and the analysis of artworks. The Australian curriculum cross-curriculum perspectives provide contexts in which knowledge integration can be explored. One example is intercultural understanding. So rather than a superficial treatment of the cultures and practices of a particular country, Year 5 and 6 students could examine how a nation's beliefs and cultural practices convey meaning and influence people's sense of identity and belonging. Bringing together awareness and appreciation and respect for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander literature in English might also involve looking at storytelling traditions, maybe oral narratives and that type of thing, and also contemporary literature. Students might learn to develop respectful, critical understandings of some of the social, historical, and cultural contexts associated with different language features and texts, such as the use of images and visual language. This is quite a common one that comes up. If a teacher asks students to draw a picture to accompany a piece of writing, where the focus of the lesson is on composing well-constructed, meaningful sentences with good attempts at spelling, then knowledge integration would likely be coding a 1. The body of knowledge being addressed in that lesson is that of writing with clarity and accuracy. So to code a 3, there would need to be a meaningful connection with specific visual arts knowledge about the characteristics of a quality drawing, for example. So the lesson might also require students to think about the use of colour and line and shape or contrast to strengthen the quality of their illustration and to use the drawing to add meaning to their writing. For older students, it might be that in considering the concept, a picture paints 1,000 words, they might draw connections between the power of the written word versus the power of visual texts and images. It might involve exploring how writers use language devices to create vivid images in the mind of the reader, but also how artists use structural frames to produce artworks that use symbol systems to communicate meaning through a shared visual language understood by artists and by audiences. And these are just a few examples, and you can find many others in Jenny Gore's fabulous videos on each of the elements. In the Quality Teaching Academy members area, you'll see, in fact, that's the one highlighted here for knowledge integration. You'll find some 1 to 2 minute videos that really help to give some more examples. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at those as well if you'd like some more. Now, in terms of professional development opportunities, there are many more that you can do in terms of developing your understanding of the quality teaching elements and how they might be embedded in practice. And these are a few just on the screen at the moment. And certainly the 2024 QTIP conference is coming up in the middle of next year in Sydney. So in summing up, I guess this element really challenges us to consider where there might be opportunities to make meaningful connections between topics and subjects to help students make sense of what they learn at school, as well as making significant connections to important ideas and concepts. That's the end of our webinar, and we hope that this has been useful for developing a little deeper understanding of the element of knowledge integration. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to email us at qtacademy@newcastle.edu.au. Thanks for tuning in.
QT Academy, empowering teachers to empower each other.